morning, everyone. Before we begin, I would like to mention a few health and safety issues. Since we are a working precious metals refinery, if you would please do not venture past the yellow caution tapes around the perimeter of the area. We have limited our melts today, but we still do have some processes working. Our exit doors are alarmed, so please exit through the way you came in. If in case there is an emergency, there are 2 emergency exits behind me, and one on the side of the building and one on the front of the building. The restrooms are marked with signs. The ladies' room is actually through the door into the office and to the right. The men's room, there's one to the right as well as one in the office as well. So, welcome to the 18th annual West Point Ring Melt Ceremony, hosted by Pease Curren Refiners. Each and every one of us is honored and proud to be part of this historic event. The idea of the ring melt was conceived back in 1999, and Pease Curren became involved in 2001 when one of our employees, Keith Edwards, a West Point graduate from 1985, suggested we team up with West Point to host this prestigious event. It's been a proud tradition that we've done every year since that point. Over 500 West Point alumni rings have come through our doors to be melted into class rings for the next generation, each with their own history, and we are truly humbled to play a part in telling that story. Without further hesitation, I would like to introduce the Director of Class Services, a West Point graduate of 1990, Kathy Kilman.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ring Melt Ceremony for the Class of 2019. I'm Kathy Kilner, the Director of Class Services for the West Point Association of Graduates, your Master of Ceremonies for this event. On behalf of the West Point AOG Chairman, Lieutenant General Retired Joseph DeFrancisco, and the West Point AOG CEO and President, Mr. Todd Brown, it is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished guests. The Class of 2019 and the Association of Graduates are honored to welcome the 77th Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Stephen Gilland, my classmate, go Class of 90, sorry, I just had to throw that out there. And the United States Corps of Cadets Command Sergeant Major Thomas Kenny. We are gathered here today to celebrate the long gray line of West Point graduates. This ceremony brings together several groups of people: the United States Corps of Cadets, local graduates who come to support the ring donors and families, Pease Curren, Herff Jones, the Association of Graduates, and most importantly, the families and friends of the ring donors. I want to thank each of you for your attendance today. This program couldn't exist without the families willing to donate their loved ones' rings. And our ceremony today is enriched by your presence. Thank you to all of those 26 families that traveled here today. I'd like to thank our hosts and recognize them, Pease Curren. This is their 17th consecutive year hosting this special event. In particular, I want to thank their owner, Francis H. Curren, Jill Bibby, Lisa Rowe, and Debbie DuBois. Thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes and making this out of your refinery. Great job. Also with us this morning is Buddy Cote from Herff Jones. Herff Jones will be making the rings for the Class of 2019. And again, thank you to the local graduates that are here with us this morning. I know many of you have been to past ceremonies, so thank you for coming back. Also with us today is West Point Lieutenant Colonel Ambrose Bonu. He is the class advisor for the Class of 2019, and Captain Dan King, who's the tactical officer for Company D4, and the Class of 2019's officer in charge, and also the officer in charge of this ring melt. Thank you for all your assistance. We have several cadets here with us today. They're primarily the class officers and regimental ring and crest chairmen from the class of 2019. They'll be reading the donor names during our ceremony. I'd like to recognize and thank two people who continually donate their time and resources to support this program. Vic Lozier, who is unable to be here today. He's from the class of 1986. He is the owner of Elm Press, and year after year he prints all of our printed materials pro bono. Let's give him a round of applause. And another individual I would be remiss to not thank is Keith Edwards, class of 1985. Keith not only helped to bring this program here when he was the VP of Sales, as Scott had mentioned, but Keith also continues to support the program now by volunteering his time. He's assisted in writing over, spending 1,500 volunteer hours in writing the biographies of all these ring donors, and I think that deserves a round of applause as well. I'd like to also thank Kavanaugh Jewelers, who donated their time and services to remove the stones from the rings. Now on to what you've all been waiting for. The West Point Class Ring Memorial Program. It was Lieutenant Colonel Ron Turner, class of 1958, who first proposed this idea. He felt strongly that there should be a tangible connection between cadets and graduates, and for him this connection would be powerfully realized by a program that incorporated the gold from graduates' donated rings into the gold used for cadets' class rings. His idea became a reality, and every West Point class since the bicentennial class of 2002 has been able to grip hands with those graduates from the past whose donated rings are now a part of this memorial program. In today's ceremony, we have 69 class rings, ranging from the classes of 1916 to 1987. To date, 451 rings have been donated and melted. Each year a sample is extracted from that ingot of melted rings and then added to the melt the following year to ensure that gold from all the rings going back to the inaugural ceremony are included in the production of rings for the upcoming first class cadets. Today, rings will be melted into a solid gold bar that will be added to the gold used to forge the class rings for the class of 2019. All of the 2019 rings will contain gold not only from today's ring melt, but also from every ring that's been donated since the program began. The rings that will be melted today include those from 3 general officers. They also include rings from graduates who saw combat in the Mexican expedition in 1916, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, from graduates who themselves were the children, grandchildren, and graduates, from graduates whose own children have joined the Long Gray Line, and from graduates who became leaders in industry and their communities. This year, the largest contingent of donated rings, 9, came from the class of 1969. The class of 1969 is the 50-year affiliate class for the class of 2019, and we have 1 living donor with us today from that class. Please note this is a record number of rings ever donated by one class in 1 year. Before we begin the ceremony, I'd like to go over some brief notes about the flow of this morning's ceremony. We will proceed in the order of the biographies in the biography booklets. Hopefully you all received one when you came in. And if you didn't, we can have some staff perhaps give you one. It starts with the oldest ring and continues to the most recent, and they are alphabetized by class. The cadets will read the ring owner names, class years, and the names of who is present to place each ring into the crucible. For those families who do not have anyone present, a graduate will place the ring into the crucible on behalf of that family. After the cadets announce the name and year group of the ring donor, they will also announce the name of the person or persons placing the ring into the crucible. Ring presenters are welcome to say a few short words if they so choose after placing the ring into the crucible. If you choose to say a few words, we ask that you come to the podium so that everybody can hear you. The cadet will wait until the presenter completes placing the ring into the crucible and is on his way to sit back down before announcing the next name. If you are presenting a ring, please pay particular attention to the order when it gets close to your turn to present. We will have an on-deck staging area to my left, your right, for the next presenter, over by where Joanne is standing. Joanne, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. And thank you, by the way, Joanne, for all your assistance with this program. So I ask that the presenters please walk to the back and around, and then if we could have 3 people on deck at each throughout the ceremony, I think that will help things flow along. There's 1 chair reserved for you if you would like to be seated. For any of you not able to come to take a closer look at the framed biographies, we'll have staff on hand that can help point out where the ring is that you're looking for. Again, so the biographies are all listed in class order and alphabetical order. So at this time, will the presenters for the first 3 rings please move to the on-deck staging area. We will now begin the ceremony. Will Cadet Tony Smith please come forward?
Thank you, Ms. Curren. Brigadier General Dwight F. Johns, class of 1960. Placing General Johns' ring into the crucible is his grandson, Colonel Retired Dick Johns.
Since I'm kicking off, I do get to spend 20 seconds. My grandfather was very proud when he was accepted as a cadet in 1912. He was obviously very proud when he graduated in 1916. Fast forward to 1969, he was very proud when he swore me in and commissioned me in the Corps of Engineers. And he would be honored and proud to be part of this ceremony today, I guarantee you that. So thank you very much.
Ferdinand Gustav von Kummer, class of 1917. Placing Mr. von Kummer's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the President and CEO of the West Point Association of Graduates, Mr. Todd Brown, class of 1985. Brigadier General Lester D. Flory, class of 1919. Placing General Flory's ring into the crucible is his grandson, David Flory, and his granddaughter, Debbie Hanson.
On behalf of 4 grandchildren and my father, retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert Flory, class of 56, Debbie and I are proudly present this ring from our grandfather. I know he would truly appreciate this opportunity and would have relished the opportunity to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Colonel Virgil F. Shaw, class of 1919. Placing Colonel Shaw's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is the 77th Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Steve Gillett, class of 1990. Colonel Frederick S. Lee, class of 1922. Placing Colonel Lee's ring into the crucible is Greg Banner, class of 1979. Lieutenant Colonel Henry S. Jernigan, class of 1924. This ring was donated by Colonel Jernigan's daughter, Marilyn Dennett. Ms. Dennett is also the widow of Colonel George Dennett of the class of 1946, whose ring is also in today's mount. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Jernigan's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Captain Daniel King, class of 2008. Colonel Charles H. Waters, class of 1936. Placing Colonel Waters' ring into the crucible are his sons, Kevin Waters and Charles H. Waters, Jr.
Well done, Dad.
I will now be followed by Cadet Christian Ackerman.
Next we have Colonel Edgar J Meyer, class of 1937. Placing Colonel Ingmeyer's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Chris Frawley, class of 1984. Colonel James E. Mrazek, class of 1938. Placing Colonel Mrazek's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Melissa Duham, class of 1989. Colonel Richard T. Bowie, class of 1939. Placing Colonel Bowie's ring into the crucible are his daughters, Mrs. Ann Bowie Blair and Mrs. Faith Bowie Brown. Colonel Howard D. Elliott, class of January 1943. Placing Colonel Elliott's ring in the crucible are his daughters, Catherine Lysick, and son, Howard D. Elliott Jr., class of 1974. Colonel Scott M. Case, class of 1940. Placing Colonel Case's ring into the crucible on behalf of his family is Colonel Retired Johnny Shaw, class of 1969. Colonel William J. Nelson, class of 1944. Placing Colonel Nelson's ring into the crucible is his son, Mr. James Nelson. Colonel Edward W. Samuel Jr., class of 1944. Placing Colonel Samuel's ring into the crucible is his daughter, Mrs. Sally Shahid. I'll be followed by our class historian, Cadet Isabel Vargas.
Colonel George L. Dennett, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Dennett's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Fred Shahid, class of 1968. Colonel Harold W. Horn, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Horn's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Robert Scully, class of 1965. Colonel Samuel R. Martin, class of 1946. Placing Colonel Martin's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Chris Brawley, class of 1984. Leon B. Musser, Jr., class of 1946. Placing Mr. Musser's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Dale Kurtz, class of 1973. Major James E. Colburn, class of 1947. Placing Major Colburn's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Steve Caldwell, class of 1968. Colonel Boyd W. Allen, Jr., class of 1949. Placing Colonel Allen's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Sean Dorfman, class of 1990. Colonel John L. Carr, class of 1949. Placing Colonel Carr's ring into the crucible is Mr. Mike McGovern, class of 1969. I will now be followed by our class secretary, Cadet Marina Camacho.
Albert H. Gehring, class of 1949. Placing Mr. Gehring's ring into the crucible is his daughter, Miss Melanie Gehring. David C. Krimendahl, class of 1949. Placing Mr. Krimendahl's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Martha Krimendahl, her son, Chris, and her grandson, Merrick Krimendahl. Winston G. Walker. Placing Mr. Walker's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Major Retired Frank Tavola, class of 1969. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas M. Berry, class of 1950. Placing Colonel Berry's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Colonel Retired Casey Brown, class of 1969. Colonel Lawrence W. Jackley, class of 1950. Placing Colonel Jackley's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Jerry Sidio, class of 1970. Major William R. Lambden, class of 1950. Placing Major Lambden's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Stephen Herbert, class of 1969. Colonel J. Godfrey Crow, class of 1951. Placing Colonel Crow's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Dale Kurtz, class of 1973. I will now be followed by our class treasurer, Cadet Katie Selekian. Thomas B. Horgan, class of 1951. Placing Mr. Horgan's ring into the crucible is his son, Eric Horgan. Lieutenant Colonel Donald A. Van Mater, class of 1951. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Van Mater's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Kathy Kilmer, class of 1990. Colonel Michael A. Booz, class of 1952. Placing Colonel Booz's ring into the crucible is his daughter, Julie Booz. Gordon M. Hahn Sr., class of 1952. Placing Mr. Hahn's ring into the crucible is his widow, Mrs. Carol Hahn, and their son, Charles. Lieutenant Colonel O. Kirk Ehlers, class of 1953. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Ehlers' ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Melissa Duhane, class of 1989. Lieutenant Colonel Edward T. Lynch, Jr., class of 1953. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Lynch's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Sean Dorfman, class of 1990. Colonel Clarence E. Talley, Jr., class of 1959. Placing Colonel Talley's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Tom Gibbons, class of 1979. I will be followed by our class information systems officer, Cadet Zach Brett.
Colonel Newell E. Vincent, class of 1954. Placing Colonel Vincent's ring into the crucible is his daughter, son, and grandson. Lieutenant Colonel retired Patricia A. Vincent, Doug Vincent from the class of 1989, and Cadet Christian Vincent from the class of 2019. So my dad's dad actually went to the Naval Academy, so the first thing that he did right was correct that mistake. Nothing I think would make him more proud than to see this. I wish that he could see it in person, but he had 4 children with my mom, class of 79, class of 78, class of 89, an aviator with my sister, a class of 2017 that graduated last year, and his son Christian will get part of this ring. Samuel P. Walker III, class of 1954. Placing Mr. Walker's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Major Jonathan Elliott, class of 2003. Colonel Charles R. Johnson, class of 1955. Placing Colonel Johnson's ring into the crucible is his son, Colonel retired Samuel H. Johnson, class of 1982.
Class of 2019, I want you to know my father wore this ring proudly ever since the day he got it as a cadet. And if you look closely at the ring, you can no longer read the words "Do Honor Country." But I believe that's not because of wear and tear. I truly believe that's because my father willed those concepts to live in his heart. And I hope this token today helps those 3 concepts live in yours.
Thomas S. Bainbridge, class of 1957. Placing Mr. Bainbridge's ring into the crucible is his daughter, Mary Beth Bainbridge.
I just want to say thank you to everybody here and that came for Thomas, and perhaps more importantly, everybody that will follow. This is not a farewell, but a beginning. Thank you.
Colonel Joseph W. House, class of 1957. Placing Colonel House's ring into the crucible is his classmate, Colonel retired John Fingers.
In addition to receiving a Bronze Star for Valor in the Vietnam War, Joe also was Chief of Staff for the 18th Airborne Corps when we invaded Grenada. And after he retired, he did a lot of volunteer work in the Tampa, for his neighbors in the Tampa area. And so I can say, well done, Joe. May God bless you and your family.
Daniel E. Carter, class of 1958. Placing Mr. Carter's ring into the crucible on behalf of his family is Keith Edwards, class of 1985. Colonel William H. Dunning, class of 1958. Placing Colonel Dunning's ring into the crucible is Doug Pardo, class of 2000.
followed by my classmate, Cadet Colin Cooley, the chairman of the Ring and Crest Committee.
Brigadier General William G. Gainey, class of 1958. Placing General Gainey's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is the chairman of the West Point Association of Graduates, Lieutenant General retired Joseph D. Francisco, class of 1965. Gordon L. Goodman, class of 1958. Placing Mr. Goodman's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Mr. Dale Curtis, class of 1973. Donald W. Johnson, class of 1958. Placing Mr. Johnson's ring into the Crucible on behalf of Mr. Johnson is Major Jonathan Elliott, class of 2004. Lieutenant Colonel Robert W. Mills, Jr., class of 1958. Placing Mr. Mills' ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Lieutenant Colonel retired Dennis Household, class of 1969. Colonel Joseph A. Shea, class of 1958. Placing Colonel Shea's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Colonel retired Michael Speltz, class of 1969. Lieutenant Colonel Edward N. Laughlin, class of 1959. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Laughlin's ring into the Crucible is his widow and daughter, Mrs. Carolyn Laughlin and Mrs. Linda Spencer. Joseph E. Fortier, III, class of 1960. Placing Mr. Fortier's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Colonel retired Johnny Shaw, class of 1969. I will now be followed by the Vice Chairman of the Ring and Crest Committee, Cadet Bernard Tortories.
Robert H. Mills, class of 1960. Placing Mr. Mills' ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Doug Pardo, class of 2000. Captain Seth J. Hudick, class of 1962. Placing Dr. Hudick's ring into the Crucible on behalf of Dr. Hudick is Captain Daniel King, class of 2008. Lieutenant Colonel Charles S. Merriam II, class of 1962. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Merriam's ring into the Crucible is his son, Mr. Charles S. Merriam III. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin R. Wilkerson, Jr., class of 1962. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Wilkerson's ring into the Crucible is his widow, Mrs. Virginia Wilkerson. Second Lieutenant Anthony H. Clay, class of 1965. Placing Lieutenant Clay's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is a family friend and classmate, Mr. James D. Harmon, Jr.
My roommate Tony Clay was a 4-time All-American swimmer, beat Navy 4 times, and the thing he liked best about it was seeing his name in the Navy pool as the holder of the 100-meter freestyle record. In Ranger School, Tony was struck down by rheumatoid arthritis. He was forced to leave the Army, much to his disappointment. Tony asked me to do this for him as a sign of his love for West Point.
Captain John T. Martin III, class of 1968. Placing Captain Martin's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is Steve Caldwell, class of 1968.
Since the long gray line is pretty evident in the symbolism here, I thought I'd do a brief long gray line story. As you heard, I'm 68, which means I'm going to my 50th reunion in May. The first 50th reunion I saw was June of 1965, which was the end of my plebe year. We were told to salute the old grads we saw who had a black, gold, and gray armband and a big number 15 on the armband. It was their 50th reunion. As I was walking down Thayer Road, 2 of these old men were walking towards me, joking and clearly having a good time. So as instructed, I saluted them, and I also had a greeting. I said, "Hello, Mr. President, General Bradley."
Major George W. Albrecht, class of 1969. Placing Major Albrecht's ring into the Crucible on behalf of Major Albrecht is his classmate, Major Retired Frank Tabella. I will now be followed by Cadet Hollis Shoptop, our 2nd Regiment ring impression.
Lieutenant Colonel Norman A. Brown, class of 1969. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Brown's ring into the Crucible is his widow, Mrs. Lynn Brown, and her son, Mr. Norman A. Brown, Jr. Colonel Robert R. Cababa, class of 1969. Placing Colonel Cababa's ring into the Crucible on behalf of Colonel Cababa is his classmate, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Dennis Elson. Lieutenant Colonel George C. Fogel, Jr., class of 1969. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Fogel's ring into the Crucible is his widow, Mrs. Linda Fogel. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur P. Ireland, Jr., class of 1969. Placing Lieutenant Colonel Ireland's ring into the Crucible is his life partner, Miss Lisa Tugwell. Second Lieutenant Thomas G. Lowry, class of 1969. Placing Lieutenant Lowry's ring into the Crucible on behalf of the family is his classmate, Colonel Retired Casey Brown. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry C. Maley, class of 1969. Placing his own ring into the Crucible is Mr. Jerry Maley, from the 50-year affiliate class for the class of 2019. Class is 1969.
This ring's been to a lot of really interesting places, and I really wish the same to all that follow.
J Meyer, class of 1969. Placing Mr. Muller's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Mr. Muller's classmate, Mr. Mike McGovern. I will be followed by Cadet Jason Hunt, 4th Regiment Ring Press Chairman.
Colonel Dennis W. Tighe, class of 1969, placing Colonel Tighe's ring into the crucible on his behalf is his classmate, Lieutenant Colonel retired Michael Speltz. Major John C. McDougall, class of 1970, placing Major McDougall's ring into the crucible on behalf of his family is his classmate Jerry Sidio. Lieutenant Colonel Randall C. Robertson, class of 1975, placing Lieutenant Colonel Robertson's ring into the crucible on behalf of the family is Tom Gibbons, class of 1979. Lieutenant Colonel Eric A. Bruner, class of 1976, placing his own ring into the crucible is Lieutenant Colonel retired Eric Bruner.
I just wanted to dedicate this to my brother, Todd, who was a member of the class of 1979. He passed away during his yearling year.
Major Alan J. Valandre, class of 1983, placing his own ring into the crucible is Major retired Alan Valandre. Accompanying him is his son, Cadet Anthony Valandre, class of 2019.
About 3 years ago, I was joking with my family and friends saying, you know, West Point's going to remove all records that I was ever there. They're going to come in, they're going to take my ring from me, because at that time my daughter was a freshman at the University of Notre Dame in Navy ROTC. And my son was very, very closely contemplating going to the Naval Academy, accepting his nomination there. And so I knew that something was going wrong, but then he made his visit, he went to West Point, and now there's no way they're ever going to be able to take this from me because I'm giving it to them now. So this program is a great program. I get to link with my son and every graduate after this. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Mark R. Bleasy, class of 1987, placing Lieutenant Colonel Bleasy's ring into the crucible is his mother, Mrs. Marilyn Bleasy. Followed by Mrs. Kilmer.
The Legacy Gold sample is next. The Legacy Gold sample is extracted each year from the ingot of melted rings. It is added to the melt the following year to ensure that a small amount of precious metal from each of the previously melted class rings is included in the manufacture of the rings for the upcoming class. The Legacy Gold sample contains gold from 451 class rings, donated over the past 17 years by West Point graduates, both living and deceased. These rings were worn by graduates serving in the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Air Force that have fought in all America's armed conflicts from the Philippines, both World Wars, Korea, the Dominican Republic, Vietnam, Panama, and Iraq. 3 of the rings had more than one owner. The oldest ring belonged to Colonel Percy Myers Kessler, class of 1896, who fought in the Philippines insurrection and whose son and grandson also graduated from the academy. The newest ring in the Legacy Gold was from an unknown member of the class of 1997. Other rings from unknown donors represent the classes of 1906, 1920, 1945, and 1961. The youngest known donor is included in this sample is Jeffrey Eric Sutton from the class of 1985, and he is a living donor. The 8 highest ranking donors are 4-star generals. The class of 2018's ring melt ceremony last February added rings to the Legacy Gold sample from two exceptionally distinguished leaders of character. Lieutenant General James Jumpin' Jim Gavin, class of 1929, who was not only the youngest division commander in World War II, but also the only American general officer to make 4 combat parachute jumps. And Brigadier General James A. Herbert, class of 1945, an inductee into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame for his heroic combat leadership in the Korean War, as well as 5 combat tours in Vietnam. The sample also contains gold from the ring of First Lieutenant Frank Stanley Reasoner, U.S. Marine Corps, class of 1962, who posthumously was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in Vietnam. The Legacy Gold, representing the service and sacrifice of these donors, will combine with gold of the rings of the graduates represented today to ensure that the tradition of duty, honor, country, and the long gray line will remain physically and symbolically with the class of 2019 as they proudly wear their class rings. Placing the Legacy Gold into the Crucible is the president of the class of 2019, Cadet Tony Smith. Come forward and place the Legacy Gold. Any questions as to the sequence of the remainder of the events this morning, please refer to your programs. The schedule is listed in the programs and on the front page of the bio booklet. Before we leave this room for the melting room, I ask that one member of each family come forward to be in a group photo with the cadets and the filled crucible. After that picture is taken, we'd like to have one other photo taken with the class of 2019 cadets and the members of the 50-year affiliate class and their family members. Our photographer is Anthony Denoto, whom you'll see in the back. He will be taking these photos. I ask that you please allow him to get those photos first, and then others may take their photos. When we are in the melting room, I ask that shorter individuals, I know this seems obvious, but I'm just going to state it, that shorter individuals be allowed to move to the front in the melt room and that taller individuals stand to the rear. Please be mindful that others behind you may not be able to see everything, so it's helpful if you view what is going on and then rotate so that others may get a closer view. And once the ingot of gold has been given to the cadets, we will take the same group photos in the back room. That portion of the program will culminate in the transfer of the ingot from Pease Curren to the Association of Graduates and then to the class of 2019. We will then reassemble back to this area for the ceremonial transfer of the gold ingot from the cadets to their chosen ring company, Herff Jones. We will have a 5 to 10 minute break before the melting begins. The bathrooms are located to the rear. We have staff on hand to direct you if need be. I ask that also when we're in the back, if people could refrain from being up front here because we're going to be conducting some interviews up here as well. Will one member of each ring donor family please come forward for the photo with the cadets, followed by the 50-year affiliates. Thank you.
on the ring? I don't know if there's restrictions or what the agreement. Not always, but usually most rings are either 10 or 14. Oh wow.
Sir, is the furnace propane or natural gas, or what kind of natural gas? I guess you probably have to have a pretty big tank then. Oh, okay. So that's how they get it super.
Right, that's the sound that Doug has heard. That we just put off. That was actually that's in there.
Oh, okay.
No, man, I like I want to do the ring.
Before we have the ceremonial transfer of the ingot, I would like to go over a few more administrative remarks. The framed biographies on the table, if you have not already done so, please go ahead and take them home. They're a gift from Pease Curren. We also have boxes in the back for you to take it home and travel with it safely. And bubble wrap as well, so thank you, Joanne, for making sure that we get the bubble wrap each year. If you donated a ring with a stone in it and you have not already received that stone, please see my staff before you leave. Thank you for your ring donation and for your presence here today. Without any further ado, will Cadet Smith and Buddy Cote please come forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the class of 2019, I would like to thank you for attending our ring melt ceremony. A ceremony that recognizes another milestone in our journey to one day becoming members of the prestigious Long Gray Line. It is my distinct honor and privilege to stand before you today as we commemorate the sacrifices of those who have come before us, to celebrate our class's accomplishments and to forge the bonds that will last a lifetime. To each of the families in attendance, commemorating your loved ones and classmates, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I would also like to personally thank each of you for your decisions to take part of this extraordinary program. By placing the ring in the crucible today, you're demonstrating to the world the indelible link that each member of the Long Gray Line shares. To Pease Curren, thank you for hosting this incredible event where we can celebrate the bond between alumni and cadets. These rings represent more than just precious metals, to which they are made. Above all, these rings signify a long line, commitment to ideas, the ideals of duty, honor, and country. And the members of the Long Gray Line who have answered the call to protect our freedoms and the fight for our great country. They have also served as a tangible reminder of the hard work, discipline, and motivation that each of our graduates must have to lead our country's sons and daughters in combat. As the first institution in the United States to wear class rings, there's an even greater significance to this event. As I know each of you can attest to, it takes a special kind of person to graduate from this institution. And I'm proud to share this journey with those who have come before me. My class, the class of 2019, will soon take on senior leadership roles in the Corps, and we hope to make you all proud as we continue to push towards graduation and beyond. In closing, I can think of no better words to express the significance of this event than those of Chaplain Shipman when he penned these words to the Corps 116 years ago. The Corps beheaded saluted with eyes of thanking our God, that we of the Corps are treading where they of the Corps have trod. Thank you again for this amazing opportunity to stand before you today, listening to a lot of your testimonies, and having the family members come up here has really left a lasting impact on me. And I hope to spread this to my classmates and really communicate this message of what it really means to have our alumni, link in with our class of 2019. And I hope that they will cherish this and really look back, but also push towards the future. So freedom will reign. I thank you all for coming, and have a great afternoon.
This concludes our ceremony. Thank you again for your presence today.